They lied to you about loneliness. What if I told you that the isolation you fear, the empty rooms, the silence that haunts you at 3 a.m. isn't your curse? What if it's your greatest weapon? Niccolò Machiavelli studied princes and empires for decades. He noticed something nobody talks about. The men who held power longest weren't surrounded by allies. They were the ones who mastered being alone without being destroyed by it. Today, I'm going to show you why society needs you afraid of solitude, why they pathologize independence, and how the same isolation that breaks most people can forge you into something unstoppable. But I warn you, once you understand this, you can't go back. In Law 18 of the 48 Laws of Power, Robert Greene writes, "Do not build fortresses to protect yourself. Isolation is dangerous." This seems to contradict everything I just said, but look closer. Greene isn't warning against solitude. He's warning against fear-based isolation. There's a difference that separates kings from cowards. Louis XVI retreated into Versailles while France starved. He surrounded himself with yes-men, cut himself off from reality. When the mob came, those golden walls became his tomb. But Marcus Aurelius, he wrote Meditations alone in a military tent, surrounded by war and death. He wasn't hiding from the world. He was mastering it. Machiavelli wrote The Prince in exile, banished, tortured, stripped of everything. He didn't write from fear. He wrote from fury, from clarity, from a position where he had nothing left to lose. That's the difference. The weak man builds a fortress to escape. The strong man builds a laboratory to understand. Which one are you building? You've been programmed since birth to fear being alone. Think about every children's story. The wolf is solitary and evil. The sheep who strays gets eaten. The hero always has a fellowship. Isolation is the villain's fate. This isn't accidental. Society runs on compliance. The economy runs on consumption. Both require you to desperately care what others think. If you're comfortable alone, you stop buying things to impress people. You stop performing for approval. You stop being a useful cog in the machine. Arthur Schopenhauer saw this in the 1800s. He wrote that society cannot tolerate the self-sufficient individual. You're an economic liability, an emotional anomaly, a threat. So they medicalize you. Social anxiety, attachment disorder, avoidant personality. They invented clinical labels for what might simply be a mind that doesn't require constant stimulation from the herd. I'm not dismissing real psychological suffering, but I am asking you to question one thing. Is your loneliness real pain or manufactured shame? Who profits when you believe being alone is wrong? Here's what strategists understood: that common people never will. Solitude is where original thought is born. Nietzsche climbed into the Swiss Alps alone, walked for hours in silence, his mind combusting with ideas that would reshape philosophy. Thus Spoke Zarathustra wasn't written in a salon surrounded by intellectuals. It was written in isolation so profound most people would collapse into madness. But Nietzsche didn't collapse. He transcended. He wrote, "The higher we soar, the smaller we appear to those who cannot fly." When you spend time genuinely alone, without distraction, something happens. Your mind stops echoing others' opinions. Your thoughts stop being reflexive reactions to noise. You hear your own voice, perhaps for the first time since childhood. Newton developed calculus in quarantine. Darwin spent decades alone developing evolution. Kafka wrote at night, isolated in his room. They didn't create despite solitude. They created because of it. The crowd produces nothing original. The crowd consumes, reacts, borrows and dilutes. Creation is a solitary act. If you're alone right now, you're in the position of the artist before the canvas. The question is, will you use it? Or keep mourning the absence of an audience that would only distract you? Machiavelli observed a specific type of prince who always failed the one who needed too many allies. A prince who cannot stand alone becomes a hostage to those he depends on. When people sense you need them, something shifts. They take liberties, test boundaries, treat you as an option, not a priority, because they know you can't walk away. This applies everywhere. Friendships, romance, business. The person terrified of being alone will tolerate disrespect they should never accept. They'll stay in poisonous relationships, maintain friendships with people who barely hide contempt, accept bad deals, all because the alternative, being alone, feels like death. But here's the truth that will liberate you. The ability to be alone is the foundation of every strong connection. When you can genuinely walk away, when you don't need someone, your relationships transform. You stop negotiating from weakness. You stop accepting crumbs. You relate from wholeness, not hunger. Paradoxically, this makes people want you more. The desperate connector repels. The self-contained individual attracts. This isn't manipulation, it's physics. Neediness is a repulsive force. Self-sufficiency is gravity. There's a technique Machiavelli would endorse that few understand: the strategic retreat. When you're losing ground socially, professionally, romantically, the amateur doubles down, chases harder, proves themselves desperately, and watches their position erode with every grasping move. The Machiavellian does the opposite. They withdraw, not with anger, not with drama designed to provoke pursuit. They simply become less available, less visible, less eager. In 1512, when Machiavelli was exiled, he didn't beg for reinstatement. He didn't flood the Medici with desperate letters. He retreated. He worked. He wrote. And the prince that emerged would outlive every one of his political enemies. When you retreat strategically, three things happen. First, you reclaim your attention. The energy hemorrhaging toward people who don't value you returns to you. Second, you gain perspective. When you're entangled, you can't see clearly. Distance provides clarity that proximity prevents. Third, you trigger something ancient in human psychology. People value what becomes scarce. When you withdraw without hostility, without explanation, you force others to confront what they took for granted. But this only works if your retreat is genuine. If you're secretly watching your phone, hoping for their response, you're not retreating. You're performing retreat while remaining mentally enslaved. True strategic retreat requires actual internal disengagement. You must become so absorbed in your own development that their absence becomes background noise. This is difficult, but difficulty is the filter that separates those who will use these principles from those who merely understand them. Now, we arrive at the core, what I call the transmutation, converting the lead of loneliness into the gold of sovereignty. Most people never complete this because they medicate their solitude with cheap distractions. Scroll, swipe, numb, fill every silent moment with noise. Because they can't face what the silence contains. But you're still here, which means you might be ready. Stage 1: acknowledgement. Stop pathologizing your aloneness. Stop treating it as a disease to cure. Your solitude is raw material. Every hour alone is an hour uncontaminated by others' opinions, expectations, projections. Most people live entire lives never experiencing one day of genuine psychological independence. Their thoughts are borrowed. Their identity is a composite of influences they never examined. But you have access to something they don't, an unmediated relationship with your own mind. Stage 2: excavation in solitude. You encounter parts of yourself you've been avoiding, fears you suppressed, desires you denied, shadows you pretended didn't exist. This is where most people retreat to the noise. The excavation is painful, but Machiavelli understood the leader who doesn't know his own weaknesses will be destroyed by them. Self-knowledge isn't optional, it's strategic necessity. Stage 3: integration. You take what you discover, the fears, wounds, shameful desires, unacknowledged rage, and incorporate it into your conscious identity. You stop pretending to be only light. You accept the darkness, therefore gain power over it. Carl Jung called this shadow work, but Machiavelli practiced it centuries before psychology gave it a name. Stage 4 construction. Having cleared the debris, excavated and integrated your hidden self, you now have something most never possess: a foundation. From this foundation, you build deliberately, not according to social expectation, not for approval. You build according to your own architecture. This is sovereignty, not ruling others, ruling yourself. Your kingdom is internal. Your throne is psychological, and no external circumstance can truly dethrone you. Let me show you this transmutation in action. In 1302, Dante was exiled from Florence under penalty of death. He lost everything: his position, his property, his home. Most men would have been destroyed, but Dante transmuted exile into immortality. The Divine Comedy, one of humanity's greatest works, was written in that wandering isolation. His exile wasn't punishment, it was liberation. Had he remained in Florence, caught in political games and social performance, he would have died a minor politician, remembered by no one. Seneca, exiled to Corsica, wrote Stoic works that influenced philosophy for 2,000 years. In his letter on solitude, he writes, "Set aside certain days during which you shall be content with the scantiest fare, saying to yourself, is this the condition that I feared?" He wasn't afraid of isolation. He practiced it deliberately. Thoreau retreated to Walden Pond for 2 years. What emerged wasn't just a book, it was a philosophy of resistance. He wrote, "I never found the companion that was so companionable as solitude." These men weren't suffering from isolation. They were forged by it. How do you weaponize your solitude? 4 practical steps. 1. Establish productive rituals. Unstructured isolation devolves into rumination, dark thoughts circling endlessly. Productive solitude requires architecture, daily rituals that channel alone time into creation. Machiavelli in exile had a ritual farm during the day. Evening, change into formal robes he once wore in office. Enter his study, engage with ancient masters. This maintained his identity as a strategist, even when circumstances tried to reduce him to a farmer. Your rituals do the same. They maintain your identity as someone building toward purpose, even when no one's watching. To develop intellectual companionship, you may be alone physically, but not intellectually. Books are conversations with the greatest minds who ever lived. When you read Machiavelli, Marcus Aurelius, Schopenhauer, you're in dialogue with intellects that understood what you're experiencing. Build your library deliberately. Choose authors who challenge you. 3. Create evidence of progress without external feedback. You can feel stagnant even when advancing. Counter this by creating tangible evidence. Write daily. Track training. Document development. When you re-enter social spaces, you'll have something to show. Not explanations, results. 4. Practice strategic re-emergence. Solitude is a phase, not a permanent state. When you re-emerge, do so strategically, not desperately seeking connection, but offering value. The perspective you gained, the skills you developed, the clarity you cultivated. People will sense you're different. They'll feel the weight you carry. The solitude will have changed your presence in ways you may not understand, but they will certainly perceive. Here's what they'll never teach you. There are people meant to walk alone, not forever, not completely, but essentially. They're not broken, not damaged, not missing something. They're simply built for different conditions. Schopenhauer wrote, "Ordinary people think merely of how they shall spend their time. A person of intellect tries to use it." Perhaps you're not lonely. Perhaps you're simply using your time differently than those who cannot bear to be alone with themselves. This doesn't mean all isolation is good. There's pathological withdrawal, the fear-based hiding Machiavelli warned against. But there's also sovereign solitude, the strategic positioning of one who has work to do, that the crowd cannot understand and would only interrupt. The question you must answer honestly: which one is yours? If you're hiding from life because you fear rejection, that's a wound to heal. But if you're alone because you've discovered something in that aloneness that cannot be found in company, then you're not sick. You're awakening. So where does this leave you? You're alone, right now, tonight, tomorrow, and instead of treating that aloneness as a problem to escape, you can now see it as territory to explore, a laboratory to experiment within, a forge to shape yourself. You're not being punished. You're being prepared. The solitude you're experiencing is stripping away everything that wasn't really you. The false identities, the performed personalities, the borrowed opinions, all of it is being burned away in the fire of your isolation. What remains is essential, and from that essence you will build something that doesn't require external validation to stand. Something that cannot be shaken by rejection or abandonment. Something that is yours in a way that nothing connected to others' approval can ever be. Machiavelli didn't write The Prince to be liked. He wrote it to be true. That truth outlasted every prince and politician of his era. Your solitude can produce the same. Not a book, perhaps, but a self. A self so integrated, so clarified, so deliberately constructed that it doesn't bend to every social wind. That is the gift hiding inside your loneliness. The next time you're alone, truly alone, and that familiar ache begins to rise, stop. Ask yourself, what if this isn't my sentence, but my preparation? The crowd cannot hear what the silence is teaching you. But you can.